Of course we sell candidates like products. And even when candidates use free media, it's still a sales process.
Pre-2008, the internet and the social media clearly become a part of the game. What did they change in terms of chances of candidates?
I know one of the young men, relatively young, he's in his early 50s, who runs the PR company that did an awful lot of that polling, understanding precisely who Barack Obama's potential supporters were, understanding exactly what it was they wanted to hear. I mean, you feigned a certain lack of tolerance for the American inclination to package our candidates and package their campaigns. What we've done is the same thing that Henry Ford did with cars 100 years ago. Simply steamrollered it, created a more efficient version of producing cars, the assembly line. The same thing has happened in American politics. To the degree that you can determine what each segment of the population is most interested in, and to the degree that you can, without totally compromising your candidate, give your candidate the means of exciting that part of the electorate, you're going to win. To the degree that your opponent fails to do that, he or she is going to lose.
Which goes both for the communication and for fundraising, obviously.
Of course. But the fundraising falls into a different category. If you're fundraising a la Bernie Sanders, where you're getting just a few dollars from millions of contributors.
Which is what Obama did too.
Which is what Obama did too. Then you can be very successful in that regard. But if you can get the Koch brothers behind you, and they can invest $100 million in your campaign, it takes an awful lot of small contributors to come up with $100 million. Donald Trump demonstrated that the lack of money, which is sort of an irony in the case of a billionaire, but the lack of money didn't have to stand in his way. He didn't use money. Hillary Clinton has outspent him at least 50 to 1, maybe 100 to 1. And so far, the election has been very, very close because Donald Trump found a way to use media and its obsession with every statement and misstatement that he has made to get free coverage. And he has used social media as a means of getting free coverage. So whereas in the past a candidate had to convince the networks that they wanted to do an interview with him or her, and that interview, once it was on the evening news, would give him access to 10 or 15 or 20 million people. Donald Trump doesn't need that. First of all, he just calls up the station and is put on the air. And secondly, by tweeting whatever his thought of the moment happens to be, he reaches not only his 20 million followers, but the people in the media who then repeat what he has said on his social media outlets.
Would you say that the use of unpaid media in the sense of the campaign has increased over the time?
Oh, sure. Absolutely. There is no question but that, first of all, candidates were always assumed to need vast sums of money. That may or may not be true in this particular election. The assumption was that whoever has access to the most money is probably going to win the election. So your charming question about the appropriateness or inappropriateness of selling a candidate like a product, I'm sure it doesn't reflect any lack of realism on your part. I'm sure you understand that we are way beyond that. Of course we sell candidates like products. And even when candidates use free media, it's still a sales process.
Other things probably have changed very much, which is, for example, the share of live coverage or the fast pace of everything in the news cycle.
Sure.
These changes in technology, did they affect the campaigns themselves too? Did the campaigns change due to the development of?
Sure.
In what way?
Look, in 1968, and this has nothing to do with technology, but it has to do with the Nixon campaign's understanding of how to manipulate the media. In 1968, Richard Nixon held a number of town hall meetings, and there would be a panel, a housewife, a plumber, a doctor, an African-American taxi driver, and we in the media kept looking for some manner in which the Nixon campaign had stacked the panel. In other words, were they trying to put Nixon's supporters on the panel? And we were never able to find that. And it was only after 2 or 3 of these events took place that we realized we were looking in the wrong place. What the Nixon campaign had done was to stack the audience. They brought in 400 or 500 avid Nixon supporters. The questions that the panelists asked were perfectly reasonable questions, sometimes even fairly tough questions. But the audience would respond so favorably to everything that Nixon said that it looked as though he was having a brilliant, brilliant performance. And he did very, very well.
A few last words on the subject you have touched already, which is campaign finance. Now, there has been a lot of criticism, there have been laws and reforms. What's your recollection? How did things evolve in this field in the time you witnessed?
Well, I mean, the evolution has been a sociological evolution as much as anything else. Democrats traditionally relied on labor unions. That's where the big money came from. And therefore, Democratic candidates had to be responsive to the needs and demands of working people. By and large, Republicans tended to get their money from the wealthier circles, bankers. Therefore, they had to be responsive to the needs. All of that has changed somewhat in this current age that we're in. The fact that it's now possible for anyone with access to a laptop computer or an iPhone to reach out to potentially millions of people without paying a penny. In other words, if you are interesting enough, if you can excite enough interest in an audience out there, you can communicate without any of the, there was a philosopher of mass communications by the name of Wilbur Schramm, and Wilbur Schramm spoke about the gatekeepers. America has always had gatekeepers between the voting public and the politicians. The gatekeepers have been radio commentators, television anchors, newspaper columnists, editorial page writers. less and less important.
Does it mean that it's becoming more democratic, or does it mean that it's becoming more polarized because everybody just communicates with what he likes?
Well, you touch on a very, very important point, and that is the polarization of the American public. What has happened over the course of the last 30 years, in large measure because of the fragmentation of media. It used to be a relatively small number of people who controlled the flow of information. We had 3 television networks. That was it. No cable, no satellite, no internet, no social media. Right? As the number of outlets has increased, the relative influence of each has decreased, so that what they have done, instead of trying to appeal to the largest possible audience, they appeal to an audience that reflects their own point of view. So that you have right-wing radio and left-wing radio. You have Fox on the conservative side and MSNBC on the liberal side. And America has become more and more bifurcated, more and more divided from an ideological point of view. And people tend to seek out, not the facts so much anymore, they tend to seek out an echo of their own biases, so that you get people in kind of an echo chamber where they only listen to radio programs that reflect the anger that they already feel. They only watch television programs whose anchor is likely to share their own political point of view. Terribly dangerous to the functioning of a democracy. The late Senator Patrick Daniel Moynihan used to say, every man is entitled to his own opinion, but he's not entitled to his own facts. These days, Americans in particular, and I don't know how it is in Germany now, but Americans in particular are coming to the conclusion that we're all entitled to our own facts. You argue with a Trump supporter these days about some of the lies that he has told, and they simply dismiss that. No one's proven it. That no one's proven it to me, they're saying.
Yeah, I think that's crucial to the future in many ways. But one last question, as for the campaign finance, do you think that big money did decide elections or can decide elections? And if so, how should this subject be handled ethically or in legislation?
There has to be a cap. Otherwise, you have reduced democracy to a process of who has the most money or who has access to the most money. And it is only decided on that basis. Now, again, in the mix, social media plays an important role because their money is unimportant. You have a direct contact, but what you also have is an environment in which the greatest showman is going to have the greatest impact. And we come further and further away from substance. There is an old proverb that time is the mother of truth, that only with the passage of time do we ultimately arrive at something approaching the truth. Consider where we are in terms of our use of media today. Information is communicated at the speed of light in 140 characters. In other words, we have reduced the complexity of what we're saying. We have enhanced the speed with which we communicate it. And in fact, we are moving further and further away from truth, from reflection, from substance, from complexity, from all the things that are essential to the proper functioning of a democracy.